Please welcome to the stage, Michelle Rocqet.
Hi. Hi. My name's Michelle. Everyone on three say their name. 1, 2, 3. So nice to meet you. Harmony, Sarah, Bree, Brent, Jamie, Andrea, probably. I don't know. Just kidding. Those people are actually in the crowd. So I am so thankful to be here and so excited to be talking about something that has really been a useful tool in my life recently. I feel like, oh yeah, this is the first slide. This is the second slide. I want to tell you a little bit about me. So I am the youngest of 3 children. My parents are Korean immigrants, and I owe a lot of my understanding of life and a lot of my tastes and a lot of my sort of personality to my older brothers, because they were old enough that they sort of were able to sort of insert like a little more coolness in me. Definitely deepened my love for Boyz II Men, and took me to my first spoken word slam, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I really owe a lot to them. And the oldest is Jin, who's right here in his little 90s sandals here. And this is Youngmin, middle, and then the cutest, me. And I, in addition to all the beautiful, wonderful things that my brothers have provided me in my life, they have also taught me a lot of lessons through some not so pretty things. They, in their adult lives, really struggled with addiction. And my entire adult life, I have known them to be addicts. And so I have developed these coping mechanisms throughout my life in order to deal with sort of inconsistency or just loving someone so much, but them not necessarily being the healthiest thing for you all the time. It's a very difficult thing. When you say one thing and you do another, it's sort of a form of dysfunction. And so when you come from a dysfunctional family, it's a really intense mixed emotion, because you love them so much and you want to do anything for them. And so it kind of looks like a lot of self-sacrifice. My parents sacrificed a lot for me to be here, for me not to be a doctor, and for me to be a musician and sing Destiny's Child at like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. So they sacrificed a lot, and so a lot of my life has been trying to make sure that I made it worth it for them and for my ancestors before them. So I definitely was an oops baby. You can tell I'm a lot younger than my brothers. Oldest brother's about 13 years older, and Youngmin's about 9 years older. And I think my mom got pregnant when she was almost 40, and they were like, ooh, yeah, okay, yeah, we can have another kid. She can do that. And so we're very close to my family for a long time. Very suddenly and tragically and unfortunately, in 2015, my brother Youngmin lost his battle to addiction, and he overdosed on fentanyl. And for those who don't know, fentanyl is a very, very highly addictive painkiller. And this was sort of our worst nightmare. It was something that when you don't have the capacity to deal with, you tend to ignore until something moves you or something has to happen. So this was an example in my life. For the very first time, something was so permanent. You know, as you grow up, it's like things will change and things will move forward and backwards, but this was like a line to the horizon, right? This is a very permanent thing. And so I felt myself all of a sudden inheriting like a whole entire new set of emotions. I think if any of you have experienced grief or loss, you understand that it's like you're responsible for all this additional feeling. And a lot of the time you don't know what to do with it. So I understood in those moments that I was gonna have to grow entirely new coping mechanisms. I was gonna have to like grow an arm, like all by myself. And I didn't really do it in the healthiest way. I started to overwork. I was still in school. I was in a million bands. I was having 16, 17-hour days and just doing it day after day after day, which is definitely like a young man's game. Like, I'm tired just thinking about it. But I overworked because I think what it was that it allowed me to have something tangible to work through. So I was processing through to-do lists. I had this never-ending to-do list, and I could just keep checking it off, and it felt like processing. It felt like I was dealing with it. And in ways I was. Emotionally, mentally, I had friends and family and people in my life who were helping me through it. But that was my physical way to just get through every day. But then all of a sudden, I had so much on my plate, and when I reached my limit, it felt like change had to come in this really like dramatic way. Like, I had to just like quit everything and just be like, no, I'm gonna move to Alaska. Screw you guys. So it made me really think about the idea of the way that we use language, especially when we talk about time and energy. So I was spent, right? And we think about being spent. We think about things coming at a cost. We have these sort of financial terms that describe the way that we spend our time and our energy. This is a concept that I've only really been talking about with like my close friends and my family, but it's been a really fun time, and it's been really exciting to be able to like formalize it and make a PowerPoint. I got to make a PowerPoint, yeah. It's emotional cash flow, okay? So this is an idea of like how we spend our time and energy. I majored in audio engineering and vocal performance, which means I essentially majored in saying stuff like, this sounds muddy, and like traveling with my college a cappella group. So I actually didn't really know what cash flow meant, so I looked it up. There's this like really useful graphic, rate of return, asset analysis. I have no idea what any of that means. So I was like, okay, let me just look it up, the dictionary definition. Cash flow, the total amount of money being transferred into and out of a business, especially as affecting liquidity. Yeah. So like pretty straightforward, but also like confusing. I don't know what liquidity means. Liquidity, does anybody know? Liquidity. Oh my God, I'm so smart. Okay. Cool, yeah. So let's, it's like so short. The definition is so short, but I still was like, I don't know what that means. So we're gonna simplify it even more. Emotional cash flow equals income and expenses. What you earn and what you spend, okay? By a very reliable source that I looked up. Just me. Okay. So I want you to consider, let's talk about income. So your name tag prompt was what energizes you, right? And I heard a couple examples. And these are things that essentially we can consider our emotional income. So like me being at this talk is super easy income for me, right? There's a community, there's people I get to meet, I get to talk to you and make weird jokes. And so that is a way for me to feel connected to you. And that connection is a sense of, for me to feel fulfilled. I also have a lot of other income in my life. I'm in a band called the Milk Blossoms, and we've been in this band for almost 10 years. And it provides me it provides me a platform to share like my most intimate self, my most vulnerable self, and I find strength in that. About 10 years ago, my best friend Harmony and I started this band, and I had no idea that we would still be going. I think we just wanted to play warehouses and house shows and bang on chair legs and stuff. And then it sort of turned into this job, and it turned into a business. And but I still receive so much emotional income from that group and being able to perform with that group. I also, as you know, teach with an organization called Youth on Record. And so I teach high schoolers music production. Excuse me, didn't mean to burp there. And it's one of the most fulfilling jobs I've ever had. It's a job that I can invite my whole entire self to, while still being able to serve youth and being able to teach them tools in order to understand themselves. It's the most rewarding job I've had, maybe ever. And so this is what we can consider our income. This is our paycheck, right? So we have to make sure that this is consistent. We have to make sure that this is stable. We have to make sure that we're happy, that we're standing up for ourselves. All the same things that you do at a job, you do with your emotional income, right? And maybe that's relationships, or maybe that's cross-stitching. I cross-stitch, and it's like painfully tedious, and it's very fulfilling to me because it's something for me to do. So consider those things that energize you as your income, right? Other sources of income, this would be like your side gig. This is like your Lyft, you're driving Lyft on the weekends. Things like gratification, pleasure, satisfaction, serenity, intimacy, joy, connection, so on and so forth. These are things that bring us happiness, right? And when we talk about flow to me, I was talking about this with Harmony in the car, flow to me is a state. It's like a byproduct of the perfect combination of a lot of things. So a lot of time we're searching for our flow, right? We're trying to get to it. We're trying to find it, and we can't. Maybe we have writer's block, or maybe we're just not feeling motivated to do it. And the reason is that because flow to me is a state, it's actually more the absence of things than it is the presence of something, of other things, right? Like the absence of your biggest, most negative characters in your head. Like when they're gone and they're quiet, you can be in your flow. Accepting yourself radically and being able to forgive yourself for things. Like I was just singing, and I definitely sang a wrong note, but it's like, okay, instant forgiveness, let's keep going. I have to be able to overcome these voices or these sort of feelings to be able to be my total self, right? To be totally present. And so that is the flow that we sort of look for a lot of time. Expenses. Okay, so expenses are things that we spend time and energy doing. This can be our actual jobs. This can be anything from, everyday costs where you're spending your time and energy. So this can also be people. People cost you time and energy. If it's a healthy relationship, hopefully they're also paying you back, and that it's a balanced relationship. But a lot of the times, things that we're asked to do come at an expense, right? And so if we are spending more than we are making, sort of what happens. Wells Fargo gives you a call, and it's like, hey, you've overdrafted. And I'm like, yeah, I know, thank you. I get it. And we have a lot of high cost expenses, especially as we become adults and as we are doing things to pay bills. Like we have responsibilities. Maybe we have families. Maybe we have other things. And these cost a lot for our time and our emotions. And so as a creative, that can easily then take up all of our time. And if we don't make time for our creative states, we don't make time to be in states of flow, then we'll never get to it. You're working 40 hours a week, you go home and you're like, I'm tired, I can't, I'm not gonna go to the studio, I'm not gonna do this, I'm not gonna write, I have to rest for the next day. And so it's this sort of endless cycle. So actual jobs can be really expensive. If we're lucky enough to be able to do our creative jobs full time, that's a total blessing, but that comes with expenses. So with the Milk Blossoms, we just wanted to sing our sad songs, and then people are like, but we had to learn over 10 years how to actually run it as a business, how to negotiate guarantees, and how to promote, and how to market, and all those things, because we're running a business. And that comes at a high cost. Sometimes it comes at a cost of being able to write together. Sometimes it comes at a cost of just being able to hang out together. And so then your income starts to deplete, and you're just spending all of your energy on a side that is necessary, but is not necessarily, it starts to outweigh what brings you happiness. Being able to teach youth is also a huge investment of my time and investment of my heart. But when when you feel like you don't nail your job, or you feel like you're not serving the kids in the way that they deserve, then that comes at a high cost emotionally. So it comes with a lot of income and expenses. I I recently also had a couple people in my life that I love so dearly, but they take up so much space. This is something that I learned earlier in my life, is that if someone is in emotional crisis, a lot of things happen. Like, you tend to like drop everything and you make a lot of space for them, and you spend your time and energy with this person, and you are essentially loaning them, right? You're giving them a loan. And this happens. People have bad days, they have bad weeks, and your investment in that relationship is, you can make the decision whether or not you're going to loan them the money. But when a person is in emotional crisis all the time, it starts to really eat away at you, and the cost is physical, and it's spiritual, and it's at the expense of you. I heard this quote recently that was, stop being the go-to person for people you can't go to. Oh, yeah. Everyone was like, spit, poet, spit, Yeah, I'm going to say that one more time. Stop being the go-to person for people you cannot go to. I think we are in a part of a conversation, especially as creatives, about our mental health. That's something that is a big deal right now, as it should be. And I think part of it is because there is this romantic version of being a creative that means that you have to be married to sort of like the quote unquote grind, right? Like your ability to work all hours of the night sort of puts you at a normal place. It sort of puts you at a normal status compared to others. And that's a really harmful narrative. It's very gray too, because if we're really enjoying something that we're doing, like we're getting to do what we love, like we will tend to overspend really quickly. So a lot of the reason that the subject also came up is because around last year, my oldest brother, Jin, had showed up to Denver unannounced, and he, for the most part, had been sober after my other brother passed away, but I could tell that something was a little bit off. And he sort of showed up at my house unannounced with these two people that I had never met. And he was like, hey, can we just, can we like take a shower and do this? Like, I'm just trying to help these people out. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I remember this moment where I was sitting in the back of his car because I was filling up his tank so that he could get back home. And I just didn't have anything. I left. I wanted so badly to be able to help him. And I just knew that this was one of the last things that I could spend my energy on. Like, unconditional love does not mean unlimited. And when you reach your limit, then you understand that your time is valuable. And so it's like I was making all these loans, and I would have done it every day if I could, but there was just a point where I couldn't anymore. And I was like, oh, this is a problem. This is a problem. So within these things that we do, we have to realize that we have a limit. Being able to realize that we have a limit means that we have to protect it. We talk a lot, I think we talk a lot about boundaries these days, and a lot of it sounds like just saying no and like sort of protecting yourself. But boundaries are meant for you to be able to say no in order to authentically say yes to the things that you care about most, to the things that are important to you, right? To continue to receive the income and the heart reward of the things that you do, you have to be able to set So when you're at low funds, a couple things will happen. So in college, I worked like a barely part-time job and went to school full-time and was in all these things. And so I was literally at low funds, but also emotionally I was at low funds. And so I would start taking out short-term loans. If you've ever taken a short-term loan out and you're like 20 years old, like just tell that 20-year-old, like, don't. Like, don't. Because you're like panicked. You're like, okay, I gotta pay for rent. Cool. So I'm gonna go to like, yada yada, bloop blop, and then you're gonna give them 2 of your paychecks, and you're like, hey, look, I make money, and they're like, cool. Here's $250, and you're like, yes, yeah, cool. I can go to Panda Express or whatever, and then. But then you start paying things back, and you're realizing like, oh, I'm paying almost double. Like the interest is crazy, and we have these sort of examples in our lives. Like emotional short-term loans, right? So for some of us, social media, it kind of allows us like to leave our bodies kind of be connected, but at the same time, it sort of allows us to like turn a part of our brain off. And that's kind of a state of flow, right? Being like just endless scrolling is kind of a weird sense of flow, but we're like synthesizing it, we're creating it, and that's not always something that is good to rely on, something like that. And you're also constantly sort of pushing your empathy into this like screen, and sometimes it's really an incredible tool for connection, but at the same time, like you're just endlessly pouring buckets and buckets of your feeling, and you're not getting anything back for the most part. Things like binging Netflix and Hulu, that was my thing. I would like watch an entire season on my day off, and I'd be like, cool. Like I watched an entire season of Grey's Anatomy on my way, like on a plane somewhere, and I felt like the characters were like talking in my head. I was like, Dr. Christopher Yang, and I'm like, what? And so I sort of became these characters. So that's in a way an emotional short-term loan. Things like going out, drinking, smoking. Now, in certain contexts, these things are totally appropriate. They're, they're things that can help us in the right context. But if we're trying to pay our emotional bills and we're trying to pay them with these things, then you will pay the interest. You will pay that. You know what I mean? So there's also one short-term loan provider that I borrowed from a lot, which is an app called Tinder. Yeah. Let me check my time before I get into this story. Cool. I'm totally over. Hold on, you guys. Okay, here's the short version. Here's my 30-second pitch of Tinder, okay? Dun, 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 dun. Tinder, if you don't know, it's a dating app. You can swipe left or right, depending on, if you're into the person based off of the one picture that they have. Probably at their friend's wedding is the only high definition one they have, or hiking, or like with a dog, or with a kid, and in their bio, they're like, not my kid. Anyway, so you go through these people, and you're like swiping left and right, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm into this person. Yeah, let's meet. Okay. And so I use Tinder. Tinder works for some people, absolutely. Some people are very happy. For me, it was like, yeah. Physical connection is a total type of additional income, like, right, intimacy. But when you're lacking emotional connection to the person, then it actually comes at a really high interest rate. So Tinder, I would just like get on there, go on dates, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm dating. I'm an adult. Yeah, cool. And it just was too much for me. Like it was something I was convincing myself, and it did actually, I used it too recklessly. But it was cool. It like felt good, right? To like be wanted or to be on a date and be like, yeah. They're like, you're so pretty, and you're like, oh, thank you so much. But then you'll pay for it later. Okay. Overdrafting, we talked about this a little bit, is bad. It starts to wear at you physically, emotionally, and you can't actually then you have to start paying overdraft fees, right? You have to stay in bed for the next 2 days because you did an all-nighter the night before finishing your project or whatever. You're gonna pay the cost, and then you're then never gonna be able to get ahead, and then you'll always take out these short-term loans. This is my grandma. She's really cool. Yeah, she's a survivor. She's now passed, but she defected from what is now North Korea. And she was essentially a single mother for 5 kids that moved to the States. And she taught me so much about work ethic, but she also taught me what it was to be a workaholic. She worked until the day that she died. Because it's a way for us to, I think it shows that, especially in this paradigm of the American dream, like, it's just a reminder that productivity is not your self-value. Like, your value is not measured in how much you can get done in that day. Okay? Also, sorry, I'm just rushing through this. Create a budget. All right? This is the #1 phrase that I've been using the last couple days. Like, yo, not in the budget. Okay? Because a budget is a plan. It's a vision for your spending and also your income. If you spend without a plan, you are just spending. If you spend with intention and a plan and an understanding, that's investment. Okay, so when you spend time and energy with your friends or with your loved ones or with whatever other thing that brings you fulfillment, it'll be an investment and you will get it back. Okay, here are 3 phrases that I want you to learn. First one, I'm going to say it and then you can repeat. Reschedule the worry. Everyone say that. If there are things out of your control, and you actually cannot do anything about it until X, Y, and Z happens or until you're further along or whatever, reschedule the worry. This is something that a good friend of mine told me. And it is something that's really helped me because I will just spiral into worrying and try and think about every single possible outcome so that if it maybe happens, I'll have like a clear path and I'll be like, I know what to do in this situation. But that's rarely how it happens. Things always come at us. Things will always change. So reschedule the worry. Don't spend that time and energy for a time that you can't. Like, if you have $50 left in your emotional budget and you have 3 days until your next income comes in, don't go to Sephora. You know, don't buy that setting powder you definitely do not need. Second one, I can't afford that right now. Everyone say that. Good. All right. You can't afford it. Not in the budget. You know? And the third one, which I've already said, it's not in the budget. Everyone say that. One more time. It is not in the budget, y'all. So my very last thing that I'll say is something that I sort of touched on, but since being able to use this, I understand my limitations. And understanding your limitations automatically assigns value to what you do. We do not have a limitless amount of energy and time, and we should not be expected to spend a limitless amount in that and then sort of feel terrible like a failure if we're unable to do it. So budget. By acknowledging our limitations, we acknowledge that we have inherent self-value. When we say, I don't have anything left to give, or I can only give so much, we're saying I have something to give. Thank you very much.